Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Hey, what's up? Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. You guys taking the time to do that. All right. I see everybody in the chat. What's up? Well, the real ones in the chat. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Yeah. Just do a little review. I'm gonna read a little article today. Do a little review. See what it has to say. Let's see what Jack Forbes is saying now. Let's see what he's up to. Pretty cool, interesting article. I think it applies to a lot of people. Even applies a lot to me, a lot of it, We dodge the hijacks, of course, we're ready to dodge the hijacks. We pull out the babies. Try to understand. Yeah. Shout out to all the real ones in the chat. Especially shout out for that intro beat. Shout out to Signs. He's in the chat. Chase. Good brother Chase. Shout out to all the music producers. We even got Red Lion Pacana in the house. Or Robin Dre Beats. Yeah. Beats with bite. You guys know you heard the music. So we got a lot of talent. That ancestral beat. It keep flowing. That ancestral beat keep flowing. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. All right. Let's get into some reading, some research, if you don't mind. Okay. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody that came through. Yo, respect. Yeah, much love. So they just talking about Negroes de Terra, or the Indians, or Banderistas of the Brazilian or South American people. That's how the Portuguese called the Indians, the Negroes of the land. So remember, I just reminded you when we're reading these more modern articles, supposedly scholarly, in general, Jack Forbes ain't that bad, but shout out to Jack Forbes, but there's still some hijack there when they're trying to call people by tags. He's gonna talk about one in this article. He's talked about how many, American Indians were reclassified into colored, mulatto, black, So we already know the history. We know how to pull out the babies from what Jack Forbes be saying, and so we're gonna go over this article, right? So just keep that in mind when they're saying black or Negro, what Negro? Because they were calling South American Indians Negroes of the land. All right, let me know if the music's ever too loud. Put it down. It says here, we got this from the Latin American Perspectives Academic Journal, Volume 19, number 4. The Politics of Ethnic Construction, Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, question mark, right? From autumn 1992. And the article is called The Hispanic Spin, Party Politics and Governmental Manipulation of Ethnic Identity. All right, just like you're not a crayon color, you're not just black, I'm not Hispanic. You get it? Like, I'm not just Hispanic, that's a tag. I'm not Latino, like from Latin, from like ancient Latin, These words are like tags too, just like being called colored, black, African American, so I guess that's what he's gonna be talking about here. So we're going to get into the article, see what he has to say, education purposes, commentary, critique, fair use. All right. So the Hispanic spin, party politics, and governmental manipulation of ethnic identity by Jack D. Forbes. On November 3rd, 1970, the Federal Office of Economic Opportunity convened the Interagency Committee on Uniform Civil Rights Policies and Practices under the general direction of Frank C. Kent, Director of the Office Human Rights Division. Approximately 30 middle and high-level equal opportunity officials from federal departments and agencies with programs affecting, in parentheses, poor or minority group citizens were brought together. A racial data collection subcommittee established by this committee held 4 biweekly meetings between January 14th and February 25th, 1971. And then recommended, among other things, that the federal government develop uniform racial ethnic data categories, or like a caste system, right? Oh, we got to develop this caste system, these racial categories. We got to put people in these groups. We got to group people by what they look like in these groups. A uniform racial ethnic category, in parentheses, right? The Office of Management and Budget, OMB, was to establish a standard set of racial ethnic categories to be employed in all data collection efforts and in the evaluations making use of the new data. Each agency was to implement this direction by undertaking the amendment of all data collection instruments with racial designations. All right. And you guys, the history of American Indians, how, oh, sorry, got a little closer there. Let's see a little better. So you guys know, what happened to American Indians, what happened to so-called Black folks in America, the reclassification, the paper genocide. It's the same thing. It's, the recommendations of the subcommittee, also known as the Interagency Racial Data Committee, were designed to be far-reaching, affecting every category of statistical data compiled by federal agencies and contractors. Significantly, however, the subcommittee's membership included not a single representative from the Department of the Interior or from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They didn't have a representation there. Moreover, the report collected from the Interior Department made no reference to Native Americans or to the Bureau, focusing instead on fixed recreational facilities. After the issuance of its report in April 1971, the Racial Data Committee undertook a more intensive examination of the subject. In December 1972, a report was issued entitled Establishing a Federal Racial Ethnic Data System. The committee membership was enlarged but still did not include anyone from Interior or the Bureau of Indian Affairs or from the Indian Desk of the U.S. Office of Education. Harold R. Green was the Interior staff person assigned as liaison to the committee. Frank C. Carlucci, Associate Director of the OMB, worked closely with the co-chairs of the committee, and OMB Director Caspar Weinberger Chazar was also involved. They always involved. Thus, contact was maintained with high-level personnel in the Nixon administration. Morton H. Sklar, co-chairperson, wrote Carlucci on April 14, 1972, reporting on the progress of the committee. Your agency, OMB, has been demonstrating a very active interest in several areas affecting the government's racial data policies, including your participation in the work of our own interagency committee, the formation of a racial data task force within OMB, and your proposed amendments of circulars A11 and A46. The significance of these circulars, directives for federal agencies, in this instance is that a draft version of circular number A46 dated January 31st, 1972 included the following extremely important policy statement. It says here, Spanish descent, in parentheses, includes persons of Puerto Rico, Mexican, American, Cuban, Central or South American, or other Spanish descent. All right? So literally anybody under Texas, right? In the Caribbean, right? Puerto Rican, so why Puerto Rican, Cuban? Okay, Puerto Rican, Cuban, right? They left out Dominican Republic. I guess they're not Hispanics, huh? So according to this, but as you see, all these regions are like melting pots. There's so many different types of people in Central America. Just in Costa Rica alone, here, where I'm from, like, we're not all the same here. We're not all the same. So, just grouping everybody as, this category. Now everybody's just Spanish. Okay. It says in Alaska, American Indian, in parentheses, in Alaska, right, includes persons of Aleut or Eskimo descent. Asian American includes persons of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Filipino descent. Where the option for self-identification is employed, all combinations in which Spanish descent, in parentheses, is reported are to be counted as Spanish descent, and then parentheses, Negro/Black, all right? And so this is what I was saying. So who's the Negro? When they're calling Indians from South America and historical Portuguese records Negroes of the land. So don't try, this is what I'm saying, don't try to be separating now, not only by territory, now you're doing it by color. And now you're creating a tag, black, that's a crayon. Now you got no real identity. So it's American Indian, in parentheses, and Asian American are to be counted only where Spanish descent is not reported, and the remainder are to be counted as other. Thus, Native Americans apparently could not include within their ranks Indians from Mexico. I'm talking about Indians from Puerto Rico, Indians from Puerto Rico. Are you an Indian from Puerto Rico? Are you Arawak, Taino, Carib? Are you? So they wouldn't include you though. Remember, now you're Spanish. Cuba, or Central, South America, or Costa Rica. And moreover, any person self-reported as being of both Spanish descent, including any of the subcategories such as Mexican. And again, Mexican, that's a melting pot. What type of so-called Mexican? An Indian would be counted only as Spanish. Huh? Again, an Indian would only be counted as Spanish. It don't matter if he's Indian, he's coming from these countries. This pro-Spanish and anti-Indian policy clearly could vitally affect many regions in which Native Americans were often part Mexican or part Spanish New Mexican, in parentheses. The development of uniform federal ethnic categories moved forward when in April 1973, the Subcommittee on Minority Education of the Federal Interagency Commission on Education issued an unpublished report on higher education for Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, and American Indians with a recommendation for common definitions for racial and ethnic groups, in parentheses. In June 1974, the FICE, right, that was that Federal Commission of Education Agency, right, the FICE, created an ad hoc committee on racial and ethnic definitions headed by Charles E. Johnson, Jr., Assistant Chief of the Population Division of the Bureau of the Census. There was also a working group, in parentheses, that made recommendations on several problem areas, in parentheses, and participated in the preparation of the final report, which was issued in April 1975 after a few minor changes, in parentheses, had been made by the FICE itself, or FICE, right? F-I-C-E. In the spring of 1975, an agreement was reached by the OMB and the General Account Office, the GAO, or GAO, right? The Department of Health, Education and Welfare's Office of Civil Rights, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to test the draft of the FICE categories for a trial period. In August 1976, the OMB and the GAO convened another ad hoc committee on racial ethnic categories to review the draft categories. So all these hijack agencies for what? Like ABCs, E, F, G, H, M, L, M, M, L, N, O, P. You know what I mean? O, P, P. Yeah. What are they really doing, man? All this working just to reclassify you. All these committees to draft these categories just to reclassify you. OPP, yeah, you know me. Significantly, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Interior Department, and the U.S. Office of Education's National Advisory Council on Indian Education and Indian Deaths were apparently absent. As a result of this meeting, the OMB revised the FICE's definition and circulated the proposed final draft among federal agencies. These revised categories and definitions became effective in September 1976 for all compliance record keeping and reporting required by the federal agencies represented on the ad hoc committee. Following the receipt of comments and incorporation of suggested modifications, they were accepted by the Carter administration. All right. So guys, just want you to know, I haven't read this article at all. I'm reading it live with you for the first time, all right? I literally just read the title, I skimmed through it a little bit. I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to say. So sounds interesting. Let's read it live. That's how we do it. For educational purposes and review fair use. Appreciate Jack Forbes for all the work he's done, you know. Thus, it came about that within a few months after taking office as director of the OMB, Bert Lance issued on May 12, 1977, a document entitled Race and Ethnic Standards for Federal Statistics and Administrative Reporting. In May 1978, the Office of Federal Statistical Policy and Standards in the Department of Commerce issued a statistical policy handbook containing the same racial classification system, here identified as Statistical Policy Directive Number 15. Essentially, the same rules were published in the Federal Register. The rules issued in 1977 and 78 are extremely significant as an example of the political and bureaucratic as opposed to the scientific organization of U.S. statistical data. The purpose of the directive was to provide standard classifications, in parentheses, for data on race and ethnicity, in parentheses, and federal reporting and statistical activities. The following disclaimer is worthy of note. In parentheses, it says these classifications shall not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. Disclaimer, there you go. They said it. They're like, hey, this might not even be accurate or scientific or even anthropological. They have been developed in response to needs expressed by both the executive branch and the Congress to provide for the collection and use of compatible, non-duplicated, exchangeable racial and ethnic data by federal agencies. All right, we just need a record of the people, right? Like we don't even know if we're right. We don't know if this is scientific. We don't know if this is historical, anthropological. You know what that word means, guys? Like they're admitting disclaimer. Disclaimer, just like on the DNA test boxes, disclaimer for entertainment purposes only. This is just for data collecting, just like this is right here. No reason that scientific or anthropological, right, in parentheses, classifications could not be used as given. And they don't even say why. But it is significant that the Bureau of the Census gives a similar disclaimer. All right, the Bureau of Census does the same people for its collection of racial data. All right, so when you're reading all this stuff, oh, my ancestor was mulatto, then he's black, then he's white, then he's mulatto again, then he's black. It's like a whole cycle, right? So this is what they say. They say this is the Bureau of Census. The concept of race as used by the Census Bureau does not denote any clear-cut scientific definition of biological stock. All right, that's their disclaimer. Read the fine print. So what you mean when you're saying, oh, but it Kurimeo says white. White what? Free white includes Moors. All Jews from Europe. It includes Black Europeans. Free white. Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Look it up. So you see, they add these disclaimers so they don't get sued, so they don't, they know. You see what I'm saying, guys? Good thing we're reading this, man. Now we know. I'm gonna go look for that. So when anybody's basing your race or saying, oh, you're not an Indian. Look, your grandma is listed as B for black. Now you know you can fight that because they did a disclaimer saying, hey, we don't even know if this is clear cut, this scientific or biological or whatever, man. We just making it all up. Like Rick Kittles. Just like Rick Kittles and Henry Gates. We just making it up back there. Make her Sulu, man. Oprah wants to be Sulu. The 1977 and 1978 order defined five basic racial and ethnic, in parentheses, categories. 1. American Indian or Alaskan Native. A person having origins in any of the original peoples of North America and who maintain cultural identification through tribal affiliation or community recognition. So this is that hijack, right? When you're filling out an application or whatever type of demographics data collection agency wants your info, they start giving you these options to pick from, like, wait, am I black, am I white, am I orange, am I green, am I Alaskan, am I native, I'm not a native, I'm an American, am I black, but I'm African, but no, I'm from Cuba, but hey, I don't see, but anyways, so you guys are very familiar with this stuff, right? So this limits Native American status to North Americans. So this number one, automatically, if you're coming from Central America and you're an Indian, you come from the Caribbean and you're an Indian, automatically, if you're not part of, this territory, what this says number one here, then you're not considered a so-called Native American. This limits your status to North Americans, all right? It is also a cultural definition. An Indian who ceases to be culturally identifiable ceases to be an Indian. It is not clear whether Greenland and Canadian Eskimo peoples would be included. Sure, the music is not too loud. All right. Since some people do not regard them as Indian. Hey, a lot of people don't, right? Man. It says number 2, Asian or Pacific Islander. A person having origins in any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, or the Pacific Islands. This area includes, for example, China, India, Japan, Korea, the Philippine Islands, and Samoa. And, quite honestly, I know a lot of people got stereotypes, from the Americas about Asian people, and we tend to group them together and just call them all Asian, but like they're doing here. But these are different nations. These are different people with different cultures, different backgrounds, different origins. They're not all the same. So number 3, I mean, we know what the Southeast Asians, right? We check out my Southeast Asian videos. Part 3 of my real slave trade video. Go check it out. Series, the real slave trade, part 3. So it says here, number 3, black, like a crayon color, like black, It says here, a person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Well, that automatically don't include you right there, but why did you, so why, so how are you, how do you originate from any so-called crayon color racial group? So they don't mean everybody, huh? They're saying only the ones that are so-called black. So they are so-called white racial groups in Africa. So this is what I'm saying. This is crazy right here. This is so messed up. This is paper genocide. This is you giving up everything, allowing by checking off this box. You literally just said, okay, yeah, I agree. My origin is in the crayon color racial groups of Africa. So this excludes black people from elsewhere and does not clarify the status of the brown peoples of various parts of East, South, and North Africa. It is not a cultural definition. So, and then it gets pretty racial. Now it's adding race to a caste system to Africa. That's true. All right, fair use, Hopefully they don't, we're doing this for education. Like, it says Hispanic, number 4. a person of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Central or South American or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race, regardless of race, regardless of race. This fails to include the Portuguese, French, English, Dutch, and Native American speaking peoples of the Americas south of the USA. It is partially a cultural definition. All right. That's a really bad tag. Get what they it's true. These are all tags, all this stuff. Can't be grouping all these people under that, and then you're excluding literally, like it's saying, and you're just reclassifying them too. Now they're just grouped under Hispanic, regardless of race. Number 5, no, the crayon, white. A person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. Now you tell me, when you know real history, right? And we got the primary sources, genealogy that we've shown and proved. Are you saying that no so-called black folks have origins with the original peoples of Europe or North Africa, even Middle East? Come on now. So that's what I'm saying. This is real hijack. We know what free white includes too. So it's literally includes free white includes, you know, Moors. So this includes Egyptians, and again, it's not cultural definition. So white includes Egyptians. The directive distinguished between race and ethnicity in the same manner as did the 1975 proposal. Race referred to the categories of American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian or Pacific Islander, Black, and white, this in spite of having limited the use of American Indian to North America and to persons having an Indian culture. Ethnicity referred to Hispanic origin and not of Hispanic origin. Thus, it was limited to the distinction between Spanish-speaking and non-Spanish-speaking. Huh. So that's what they're basing it on a lot of the times. Listen, when race and ethnicity were reported separately, the number of white and black persons, again, crayon colors here, who were of Hispanic origin had to be made clear. Example, black, not of Hispanic origin, Hispanic, and white, not of Hispanic origin. This language has ignored the occurrence of American Indians or mestizos within the Hispanic group. Yet at the same time, American Indians were limited to North America, thus creating a catch-22 situation. No American Indians existed within the Hispanic category. And accepting North America, no American Indians existed outside the Hispanic category either. And it didn't exist in the black category. Same thing. They try to separate you by categorizing you as black and then saying that if you can't be black and American Indian, you got to be either or, right? So they try to put you in black always. They try to put, they're saying they try to put people from like places where I'm from and stuff, no matter what they look like, no matter what their real genealogy is, who their ancestors are, as Hispanic. No matter, they're just gonna want you to be Hispanic. You know, that's why it's a generalization. Persons of mixed racial and or ethnic origins were to be placed in the category which most closely reflects an individual's recognition in his community. Oh my gosh, in his community. A somewhat ambiguous directive which could very easily be used to deny personal self-classification with a multi-ethnic identity. And that's how they get you when you're saying, no, I'm not so-called black, I'm an American Indian. I am so-called Native American. That's why this type of system creates the opportunity for people to get disfranchised, reclassified. And we participate every day, all our lives. We still fill out these applications and we still participate in their games. So the categories decreed by OMB were not to be the only ones usable in data collection, But any reporting required which uses more detail shall be organized in such a way that the additional categories can be aggregated into these basic racial ethnic categories. Thus, Native Americans and Afro Americans, that's the hijack, you see? There you go, separating who's an Afro, who's a Native. Let's see both people's genealogy, and we'll determine who's really an American Indian more. You get what I'm trying to say? All this is just talk always. Groups and categories, even in the language, when he's trying to teach people, he's trying to expose how bad the system is. eh, He got some hijacks of his own still, trying to get, you know, that he has to kind of get out of, you know. So again, separating Native Americans, anybody living in the Americas is a Native American, and who's an Afro. You talking about a hairstyle? What are you talking about, man? Because what Afro American? Like, show me their genealogy and prove to me they are from Africa. It's that simple. We into details. We ain't into no more myths or fairy tales or stories. False narratives, reclassification tags. This is what I'm trying to show you. These are false. This is a false system. And then, so they were trying to distinguish the Native Americans, whoever they're trying to categorize there, from the Afro Americans. And those two groups from the Spanish speaking countries could not be counted except as subgroups under Hispanic. But for Native Americans, this possibility was precluded by the definition of American Indian, limiting the racial cultural status to persons of North American origin. Since Mexico appears to have been excluded from North America, the definition also meant that Yaquis, listen up, Papagos, Cocopas, and other Indians of Mexican origin. These tribes are originating from the northern parts of Mexico, listen, central, but now recognized by the Bureau of Indian Affairs as Indians. So these people used to be excluded, but now they're recognized as Indians, could probably no longer be counted as such based on this system. Native Americans haven't experienced the termination, assimilation efforts of the 1950s and 1960s and currently witnessing U.S. government efforts to recognize fewer Indians for service purposes, right? Just so they don't be able to claim the money, their rights, part of the treaties. They don't want them to be claiming and living up to the treaties, Okay. May also be alarmed at the OMB's use of cultural definition. A definition that requires that a person maintain cultural identification through tribal affiliation or community recognition, in parentheses, is so subjective as to allow for arbitrary interpretation by bureaucrats. So, like, basically, the way I interpret is like, so if just because, let's say, right, there's somebody who knows, oh, he got 3 or 4 grandparents chalked out or whatever, and he got the genealogy, the oral history, right, who their grandparents are. But because he's not in the powwow, but because he's not in this affiliated in a tribal that they recognize, that they don't even want you in the tribal because you to them are a crayon color black. This is the real truth. And this happens a lot. That's just, you got to speak. And a lot of the people, it's not even the Native Americans themselves, a lot of other foreigners in those places that are kind of the ones saying no. But they're making themselves Indians. Yeah. But either way, I'm not trying to create a division. Like, there's ignorance everywhere, and we are to heal from everything and help people understand it and make them better people. We got to wise up, so we could be our own leaders. We can spread the real, you know, narratives, the real truth in our own personal communities, right? And help people understand, break them out of the spells and stereotypes and prejudices and caste systems, you know? So, hmm. So just because you don't go to the powwow, they're like, no, but you're not even like, it doesn't matter. We got the genealogy. but your ancestor wasn't on this specific role from this specific year 1868 in this specific town and like all this all this jab. So you don't join the tribe. They got it well planned out. Yeah, they know that by that time a lot of them were reclassified or relocated. Uh, yeah, we know your games. So let's keep going. Many hundreds of thousands of American Indians might be reclassified. Again, that's a big number. Many hundreds of thousands, break the spell, hundreds of thousands of American Indians might be reclassified as non-Indians simply by narrowing the interpretation of tribal affiliation and community recognition. But I never seen you in the powwow, man. You ain't an Indian. You ain't over there dancing and the one hop, the two leg one hop thing. You ain't know. I didn't see you in the last powwow, man. You're not an Indian. I got four great grandparents that were official tribal chalked up grandparents, right? That's what you tell them, and then they still deny it, right? Because they're looking at your complexion and physical appearance. They just can't fathom it. They just can't accept. They got this curse on them. They got this spell on them. This is what I'm saying. We can't. I know, we get upset. We judge them, but they don't know any better. They're just like children. People are like they're just like children. You know, all we can do is try to educate them, be the bigger person, and of course, you stand your ground when you need to. I ain't saying to back down ever. I'm just saying we can do it a certain way. Be the bigger person, man, and show them how to respect people. And let's see. So you got no community recognition, so you ain't an Indian, right? You're not affiliated with the federal tribe. So it may be suggested, therefore, that one reason for the directive's treatment of Native Americans was to reduce the numbers of persons qualifying for federal services as an Indians. All about the money, huh? A cultural definition may also endanger Hispanics, since a person whose culture ceases to be Spanish, Mexican, and so on cannot be Hispanic. Huh. It says Hispanic and American, contrasting categories. How is it that original American peoples, including indigenous and mestizo Mexicans and Central American, we're talking about including indigenous Central Americans. Shout out to my great grandparents. Shout out to my Chorotega ancestors. Shout out to my Huetar, Chipchap speaking ancestors. Shout out to the people who came and mixed with them. In general, in Costa Rica was Sephardic Jews, Muslim Moors, cryptos who were here. Shout out to them too. That's my family. And shout out to whoever came after that. But the whole point is I had to, just like you had to, categorize yourself as so-called black. I had to choose Hispanic, and nobody ever heard of no Huetar or Chorotega. None of y'all ever heard of that. So that's what he's talking about. So a lot of the more European so-called Hispanics, right? They get to be generalized with people who might have like 90, 80, a lot of indigenous blood, you know? So now they're all in the same boat. And everybody's just Spanish culture, right? Or origin. So it says here, like it says, why is it that original peoples, including indigenous and mestizo Mexicans and Central Americans, can be assigned a Spanish culture or origin? The politics of this move relates to the long struggle of some persons of Mexican extraction to escape from the prejudice directed at persons of Indian appearance by having themselves reclassified as Spanish Americans or Latin Americans. And yeah, that happened a lot, especially in Latin countries. A lot of people were like, damn, I'd rather be I'm gonna say I'm Spanish. I'm gonna say I'm Portuguese. I'm gonna say I'm gonna classify or pass as white, just like black folks did, right? I'd rather pass as white or just take on the black tag because it's dangerous. And a lot of times in periods in history in the North America, right, it was dangerous for you to call yourself an Indian. This is what they're talking about. It's the same thing. A lot of people chose, all right, I'll take on the stigma, even though they they probably like literally half Indian or even less, right? Like I mean, or more, but now they're afraid. So they escape the prejudice directed at persons of Indian appearance. This tendency was accentuated by white-only rules for participation in the Texas Democratic Party primary elections. Some Mexicans fought to obtain reclassification as whites with Spanish surnames, in parentheses, in order to not be barred from participation in such white-only activities. Hey, you hear that? So a lot of the lighter, or maybe ones that could pass, even might maybe not even pass, but just considered so-called white or free white. They did it, so they can be able to vote. Nonetheless, Mexicans were frequently segregated as a racial minority throughout the Southwest and California into the early 1950s. The concept of Hispanic, which means Spanish in parentheses or Spanish derived in parentheses, is especially observed as applied to Maya, Mystics, Zapotec, or other American peoples who often do not even speak Spanish, except perhaps as a second foreign language, whose surnames are often not of Spanish origin, and whose racial and cultural backgrounds are first American or African or mixed. That's the hijack. You hear what he's saying, though, right? These are people of color or African. They might be African because a lot of them look so-called black. Yeah. So see, a lot of hijacks on top of hijacks here. And again, shout out to my Chorotega ancestors, which is the most southernest group of Maya people that came out of Cholula, Mexico, in more ancient times and settled in the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica on the Pacific side. You know, yeah. But we don't get to claim that. I don't get to claim that because I'm not. Now I'm just Hispanic. Now I'm just Spanish to you guys. A lot of you guys, you know, and I know a lot of you now know better and don't do it, but you group all of us as just Spanish, man. Oh, he's not Indian. He's probably mixed. He's just mixed. How you know you're not mixed? Just because you're so-called black doesn't mean you're not mixed. All right. So again, I'm using me, you know, but speak for a lot of people, and this is just not about me. And I never make videos about that. So, but we gotta tell the whole thing. We gotta understand everybody. We gotta understand everybody's struggle and journey and background. And we can't, if you don't want to be categorized as a certain thing, don't do it to others. That's what I'm trying to say. Like learn about other people's history and culture and specifics, their genealogy, not just grouping them as, oh, he's just Mexican, oh, he's just Costa Rican. Well, everybody in Costa Rica is not the same. So again, for example, many Maya people from Guatemala do not possess Spanish surnames and speak a Maya language as their first or only language. As recently as 1977, a noted British scholar on the subject of race, Michael Banton, used the term Hispanic more correctly to refer to white elites of European descent. Listen, what you mean? That definitely, if that's what Hispanic means, that does not include me. And I know a lot of you would probably be like, yeah, that includes Kurimeo. He's white. That same person probably still calls himself black. Yeah. So he reported that in Mexico, Guatemala, and several other Latin American republics, Indians live in distinct communities with their own language and culture. In between them and the small Hispanic populations is the group called Latino in Guatemala and Mestizo in most of other countries. More tags and more tags. In much of this region, an Indian can become a Latino or Mestizo by behaving like one. Oh, okay. I can just act like one. Okay. To clearly comprehend the absurdity of the new U.S. usage, let us imagine that the federal government decided to refer to all English surnamed or English-speaking persons as Britannics, including, of course, so-called Black Americans, white Anglo-Americans, American Indians with Anglo surnames, and so on, all right? Good example, Mr. Jack Forbes. That's what I be trying to tell everybody. People said, you speak Spanish, so you're from Spain. I'm like, huh? Aren't you speaking English? Wouldn't it be ignorant for me to say you're from England or Germany, wherever you think English originated, just because you're speaking English? That's ignorant. So just because you got a surname, he's saying, listen, listen, this is deep right here, because this can be interpreted in so many ways. Because we know that, yeah, a lot of these surnames are your surnames. Yeah, you might be a Black Britannic, ancient Britannic. It might be your family, but I know what he's saying. He's just saying, he's trying to make an example. Like a lot of Indians got last names put on them that didn't make them always or mean that they were from those places. But he made a pretty good point. Says in one fell swoop, a new fictitious ethnic group, every bit as justifiable as Hispanic or Spanish origin would have been invented. Aside from confusing many blacks and Indians, so-called blacks and Indians, what you mean? Which ones is there's black Indians and there's Indians who are black and vice versa? And who are you talking about, man? The Britannic group would make it possible for white Britannics to fill affirmative action quotas formerly set aside for racial minorities. Then such quotas could no longer exist for subgroups within the Britannic category. In a similar manner, statistical evidence relating to discrimination, unemployment, poverty, education, etc., would become difficult to analyze since data for white-skinned persons would simply be averaged with data for blacks and browns. Huh. Anyone familiar with the Latin American world knows that brown and black persons, and especially people of Indian language and culture, are usually at the very bottom of society. That's what we're talking about. We ain't no white elite. I'm my family. Just as brown and black persons are at the bottom in the Anglo-American world. Recently, Raul Laurie Contreras devoted a column in a bilingual California newspaper to the issue of racism within the Mexican and Chicano worlds. He quoted an illegal Indian migrant from southern Mexico who was complaining of bad treatment by Chicano businessmen and Border Patrol employees, and went on to ask why some Mexicans discriminate against other Mexicans. All right, more and more war is what I'm saying, like Mexican on Mexican, right? To understand, he says, one has to examine hundreds of years of history, starting from the Spanish landing in 1519. And that's what I've been trying to say. You got to have the whole context. What I've been trying to say since day one. You must have the whole history. If not, stop guessing. You don't know. Just say you don't know. And read if you'd like to talk about it. If not, you're just babbling. You're just being stereotypical prejudice. You must know the history. I'm glad he said that. From that day forward, the color of skin, since when? Since they got here, the color of skin has dictated the measure of one's economic and social standing in Mexico. You hear that? Caste system. The poor Indian illegal immigrant thus finds himself in a situation where he is ignored at home and hated in the United States. Wow. This rather candid assessment of anti-Indian prejudice is valuable for its providing us with an unambiguous reference to the Americanoid racial character of many current Mexican immigrants. We must, I believe, be totally frank in acknowledging that far from being ethnically un, un, unified? Sorry, unified, yeah. The people of Latin America are divided along ethnic or racial lines. In many areas, this division takes the form of direct struggle between Native American nationalities or ethnic groups and Spanish-speaking white or mixed ethnic groups. We're not all the same, is what I'm saying. Everybody in Costa Rica is not the same. We're not the same peoples. A Gunnar Mendoza has written, after 150 years of independence, the Indians of vast Latin American areas, who make up the great majority of the population, are living in conditions practically the same or worse than those of the 16th century. The type of society that Spain and Portugal built in the New World in which persists today is then a society based sine qua non on the premise of the exploitation of the vast majority of people by a small minority. By who? The few control the mass, right? By a small minority. Who's the small minority controlling things, huh? Don't mention the Chazas. The use of Hispanic or Spanish origin categories achieves the end, continuing to empower white Spanish-speaking elites at the expense of people of mestizo, Indian, and African origin, which they're just calling, people with Negro and culture, right? Looks, ancestry. That's what they just call an African. But same people that look so-called Negro are Indian. They also might be mestizo. And again, who did the Portuguese and these historical records? Who? What were they calling the Indians? Negros of the land, Negros de terra. That's why we gotta dodge the hijack, even with some of the articles we read in modern times, because they're still trying to educate, but they're adding hijacks unknowingly. So we know what he means, though. All these type of peoples, the what they call minorities, right? The brown and so-called black or indigenous people, the oppressed people, are being like these categories help the elite, so-called white elite, Spanish speaking, you know, it marks the hierarchical color rank caste structure and racial ethnic diversity within the Spanish speaking and Latin American origin populations. You see what that did? It hid the whole history of the caste system that they had. Another function of Hispanic is to confuse people of color so that they will think, wait, uh-oh, hey, you gotta admit, a lot of you you hear Hispanic and automatically you picture a light-skinned person. Let's pretend you don't. And allow themselves to be dominated by white assimilated forces, which already seem to be using Spanish language television to exalt whiteness at the expense of darker skin colors. The United States government has, I believe, its own reason for refusing to recognize that the Native American race embraces people from south of the border. The motivation is linked, I suspect, with the 200 to 400 year struggle to eliminate or assimilate Indians to what? What they do to you? Eliminate you, or they assimilated you into the United States and the desire to expel. For example, racially, Indian Guatemalans who are refugees from apartheid, like racial exploitation in their homeland, by denying their Indian status, the US government can perhaps pretend that Maya refugees are not true refugees, but only economically motivated illegal entrants, So that's a very controversial subject, right? Because who are they calling, so-called Maya refugees? What's his genealogy, But that's a whole other thing, but we get what he's trying to say. They all get grouped, even as the ones that are full, more European than they are. It is significant that from the late 1930s through the early 1970s, the concept of Hispanidad, Spanishness, was a favorite propaganda tool in Latin America of the late Generalismo, Francisco Franco's fascist dictatorship in Spain. Ironically, the term Hispanic was taken up by the United States also as a propaganda tool, maybe, at about the same time that Franco's death made Spain a somewhat more palatable pill for Latin Americans to swallow. Franco's purpose was doubtless to overcome the animosity towards Spain engendered by the American wars for independence against Spanish intransigence, which, if we include the struggle of Cuba, endured throughout much of the 19th century. He may also have wanted to overcome the distaste felt for a long string of clericalist reactionary regimes in Spain, broken only briefly by the Spanish Republic of the 1930s, which he destroyed. In addition, he probably hoped to support Spanish cultural and political interests in the Americas, interests that were fundamentally anti-Indian, pro-European, and reactionary. Now the United States has become a major promoter of Spanishness. Why? All right. So remember, this is from, I guess, 1992. We saw the Bureau of the Census is a section of the 1980 long form entitled Why the Census Asks Certain Questions. In parentheses, it states Spanish, Hispanic origin or descent. The identification of Spanish Hispanic origin groups is important for a better understanding of cultural differences and for the carrying out of laws and programs aimed at improving the economic conditions of the groups. This statement certainly fails to convince a skeptical reader because finding out about people of American origin, right, indigenous origin from Latin America would be least as useful as finding out about the members of an artificially created group. Artificially created group. Artificially created group. To be more specific, it serves no useful purpose whatsoever to include European, white, in parentheses, no, sorry, what is this called? I forget already what's that called. You guys know what I'm talking about. Spaniards. So European white Spaniards are part of the target population whose economic conditions supposedly need improvement. Of course, we must face up to the likelihood of sheer incompetence or ignorance on the part of the federal officials. The term Hispanic, as well as Spanish origin and other Spanish, includes not only white Spaniards and Argentinians, but also, listen, Sephardic Jews. Sephardic means Spanish. Includes what? Who's the Sephardic Jews, guys? You guys know a lot about Sephardic Jews, don't you? And those who still speak Ladino, especially the Spanish Arabs of Western Africa, they get to classify as Hispanic. You guys hear that? The Spanish Arabs of Western Africa, they get to classify as Hispanic. Equatorial Guineans, listen, Equatorial Guineans get to classify as Hispanic. Listen, Guamanians and Filipinos get to classify themselves as Hispanic. Remember, Filipinos were Spanish subjects until 1898, long after Mexicans and most other Americans had thrown off the Spanish joke. Who is more Hispanic, huh? You get what I'm trying to say? So, who they really, this is a great point. So who's more Hispanic, huh? Chorotega, Huetar, of the genealogy I could find, the tribes. So who's more from here? And we got Filipinos and Equatorial Guineans and Spanish Arabs able to classify themselves as Hispanic. And now they're grouped with me as Hispanic. Now I'm the same as them. This is what I'm trying to say. Just like they group you with anybody who's dark complexion and call you all y'all black. Now you're just black. Several alternatives to this classification would have been possible. First, the Census Bureau might have identified a Latin American target population for study. This population would have included Brazilians. It might also have included French-speaking persons from South America. Again, French-speaking persons. Oh, man. So included Brazilians, right? Because, they're just in South America. Let's just include Brazilians. It's the same thing, right? It's all the same people, right? Brazil is a melting pot as well. There's so many different, people represented in Brazil, And then it says also, and the Caribbean. So French-speaking people. It would have been useful groups because its membership would have been exclusively from the Americas and usually of Native American. Listen, African starts to hijack. So they're talking about black folks, right? Or of mixed ancestry. Mixed with what? Let's get specific. So let's talk about details. A second alternative would have been to distinguish between predominantly white countries such as Argentina and Uruguay. It wasn't always like that though, but yeah, in general, you can consider these so-called white countries. Hey, much love, Mystery. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So, and predominantly Indian countries, this is what they call the Indians, right? Such as Guatemala, or predominantly mixed countries, African, Native American, European, such as Venezuela or Brazil. I see a lot, man, if you look at it, see, this is what I'm saying. What are we basing all this off? This alternative could easily have been linked with Latin American regional focus. Instead, the Census Bureau of other federal agencies have chosen to lump white European Spaniards, okay, together with persons of variable racial origin from the Americas and Asia, Filipino, to form a group that specifically excludes persons of Portuguese, Brazilian, French, and French American backgrounds, but includes persons speaking Native American languages, all right? There's a whole bunch of rules you got to follow, all right? For example, in inquiring about ancestry, the census specifically excludes European Spaniards from the European category and places them along with Spanish Basque. So now the Basque are the same as Spanish, and the ancient Basque guys, they're pre-Roman. They're one of the oldest groups in that region of Europe, possibly coming or linked to the Americas. Their language is the language that's closely related or sounds more like the Basque as as many American indigenous languages, the most in the world, like that resembles Basque. So that's a whole other hijack. That's what I'm saying. They categorize and group people and create these caste systems, and then they hijack the words and they're grouping people together, you know? All right. Thanks for your opinions. So it says again, so European Spaniards from the European category and places them along with Spanish Basque and a Spanish category that encompasses all persons from Latin American countries where Castilian Spanish is spoken, as well as Spain itself. This grouping is unabashed, what? Unabashedly called Spanish. All right, so all these people grouped as Spanish. You see what I'm saying? Thus, a conscious effort has been made to build a historical or historically European, Spanish-based and Spanish-dominated group rather than a regional Latino group or regional American group. All right. Historically, it was done on purpose, basically. European. This is precisely the tradition of Spanish imperialism and of Spanishness that has emphasized Spanish culture and identity at the expense of Native American cultures. Hey, G Play, much love, man. Thank you, man. Hey, female Noah, welcome to the club. Yeah. Hawa. It is also in direct tradition of the anti-Indian patterns of most Spanish-dominated countries, where Indian languages consistently go unrecognized and where native identity is regarded by the state as undesirable and calling for eradication. All right. They that was the whole plan. We don't get to, hey, I got to do my genealogy. I'm finding out I'm Indian. I don't have no agency to go to, guys, here in Costa Rica. I can't join. I can't affiliate with a tribe. I can't get an ID, like you guys up there. So take advantage and do it correctly and get your status. That doesn't exist here. They wanted eradication of the Indians. Whatever was left over, or whoever they call Indians, is very little. Like we're all now just citizens. In short, we are dealing with a racist colonialist system, tradition, and mentality still today. We are dealing with a racist colonialist system and tradition and mentality still today. And we get caught up in that ourselves. We get caught up in that hijack and we start judging and stereotyping on others and being prejudiced towards others. We get caught up in all that. The US government must have reasons in addition to those to which I have alluded for creating a new Spanish empire. Of linked nationalities, I would suggest that one of the major ones is to empower white-skinned or pale-skinned, lighter-skinned people or assimilationist-oriented Spaniards, Cubans, and socio-economic elites from elsewhere as spokespersons and brokers for a fictitious Hispanic group. These brokers can replace or exclude the nationalistic or radical leadership developed within the Puerto Rican and Chicano Mexicano communities. In short, as Hispanics, white Spaniards or Argentinians can now serve as leaders, in parentheses, right, for nationalities or peoples with which they have nothing in common, save the commonality that a wealthy Spanish capitalist or landowner has with an Indian peasant or migrant worker. Ooh, body bag. In brief, I would argue that the Hispanic concept is a Nixon administration engineered political device. From the Native American perspective, one aspect of the Hispanic formulation is that it shifts analysis away from race, color, toward much less relevant criteria such as nominal language. Hispanic is post-racial. It does not end color discrimination, but it does bury it and thereby renders it more difficult for its victims to identify the sources of their victimization. After all, Mexicans cannot experience racial discrimination, can they? And with a question mark, can they? Brown skin is only an illusion after all, since Spanish status has made race irrelevant. Or has it? Wow. Some, very interesting article we're reading here today. You pick out the jewels, the babies, and dodge the hijacks. But it's kind of deep. What we're talking about here, a very uncomfortable subject for many people, very controversial for many people, even for Black folks. Right? And I'm trying to tell you, I see you as family, brother, hope you see me the same, dependent, on what you have learned of the real history. Not because I just want you to be my brother. Hey, please be nice and please like me. I'm just telling you to rationalize, be logical with the real history of what we learned, that all these categories and caste systems, we got to get rid of all that. Hella misinformation. Yeah, look at you, PC Prince, but you ain't my family. Definitely not, man, you demon. Definitely not related to you, man. Get out of my channel, man. There you go. See how easy, like, my superpower is like ongoing, man. My superpower exposes these trolls, childish trolls, no lifers, man. Don't come here with no bad spirit, because we're not over here being mean or hateful towards anybody, man. We're trying to educate so we can treat each other better here, man. Overstand each other. You know, go with that hate to the hate channels where you are uh looked up high for being hateful. Go to those channels where they preach hate. We don't do that here. No low vibrations, man. And you're very right. I'm definitely not your family. And you don't even know how deep I mean that. Definitely not your family, man. Know that for sure, man. And I'm very proud and happy for that. Wow. I love you guys too, man. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's all right. We'll get there. That's what I'm saying. The bad apples, the bad apples in the specific communities don't phase me because I don't judge people by the bad apples in the community, okay? Because I know there's good people. I know you guys are good people out there. So this is why this is important. This is not just controversial for me. This wouldn't even be an article if it wasn't controversial at all. No, he wouldn't even be speaking on it. You're being called so-called black. We're talking about the same thing. Why? What's up with the hate? What are you mad at, man? You mad at breakfast, man? You mad at breakfast, man? Shout out to Cat Williams, yo. It says the racial character of Mexicans and other Latin Americans. All right. Again, we're just doing this for review. I didn't write this. We're pulling out the babies, we dodging the hijacks. In order to comprehend just how wrong the US government's racial classification categories are, we need to cite several alternative sources. The anthropologist Harold E. Driver, drawn upon Mexican scholarship, states that in Latin America, about 90% of the Spanish immigrants were men who came over single and married or cohabited with Indian women after arrival. Although most persons in Latin America today claim some dash of European ancestry, the percentage of European genes in entire populations is smaller than is generally known. All right. So, again, I'm just speaking for me. When I did my genealogy, that's what I realized. It's much less. But you've been classifying me as a Spanish all my life when it's much less than my indigenous background. Just like you guys, a lot of you, the black European is much less the black European because you all got black Europeans. I don't want to hear, oh, not me. I'm 100% since my, nah, man. But a lot of you got a lot less black European than, and you got a lot more indigenous. It's the same thing. But I'm not gonna just be like, yo, you're a straight black European. No. I don't want to hear that you're a black European just because you have a little bit or some ancestors. So that whole thing that they're mostly, and in actuality, when you start doing people's genealogy in Latin America, you'll see that it's actually less. That whole European gene is less, and it's concentrated to certain people in certain countries, certain regions, but is a lot less in general. In Mexico today, more than 80% of the genes in the entire population are probably Indian, with the remainder about equally divided between Negroes and Europeans. So you see what I'm saying? Now they're excluding. So that's a big hijack right there. These numbers, I can't take serious. Because now they just said, so who's the Negro and who's the Indian? Who you excluding as the... So since you weren't including the Negroes, you mean that it's a lot higher than that percentage. Europeans and so only about 200,000 Europeans and 250,000 Negroes immigrated to Mexico up to AD 1810. So again, that's the hijack big time. What you talking about, man? You never seen the Olmec hats? Hold up. You saying they weren't no Negro or so-called black Indians, ancient Mexicans in Mexico? What do you mean migrated? Migrated from where, man? So again, we know how to dodge the hijack, right? How can a people most of whose genes are probably Native American be classified as white or Hispanic? The historian Henry Bamford Parks, writing from the perspective of Lázaro Cárdenas' period of the 1930s, offers us this additional insight into Mexican historical evolution. The revolution had wrought a profound change in the national consciousness. Mexico had become aware that she was primarily an Indian nation, and that only on the basis of her Indianism could she create a civilization of her own. Indian cultural submersion as the Spanish conquest was beginning to reappear. The task which post-revolutionary Mexico slowly began to undertake was that of fusing the Indian way of life with whatever was valuable in contemporary civilization, of integrating Indian qualities into modern society without at the same time destroying them. Indian Mexico was finally beginning to emerge from the 4th century interlude of white domination The Indian races had sufficient vitality to slow off the habits created in them by oppression and exploitation and to create a future of their own. All right. So it says this passage helps us to understand why Chicano art and culture is so fundamentally different from that of Spain and also differs concretely from that of Puerto Rico and Cuba. The concept of Hispanic, in effect, denies the distinctive ethnic and national character of the Mexican people, just as the English attempted to destroy the distinctive character of the Irish. Unfortunately, anti-Indian conservatives and Marxist radicals often agree upon just this point, that the Native American character of the Latin American masses should be subordinated to a class analysis of society. The conservatives advocating the ideological perspective of the white or near white ruling class, and the Marxists offering the perspective of a usually light skinned or European derived vanguard elite. Just like here in Costa Rica, that's who really runs things, in almost Spanish countries, So-called Spanish, right? We're learning so-called. The desire to adopt Hispanic is perhaps reinforced by the often shaky status of Spanish-speaking elites in relation to the brown or brown-black masses of their specific native populations. Specifically as regards persons of Mexican origin in the San Francisco region in this case. A 30-year-old study noted that subcultural differences, but much more significantly, panicky status concerns are focal in the efforts of Spanish Mexicans to differentiate themselves from Indians Mexicans, who could scarcely be regarded as partners at a common cause. This, of course, reflects the fact noted above that in much of Mexico, as well as in the rest of Latin America, Native Americans are often still ruthlessly exploited by persons of lighter color and superior economic status. Another study suggested that in the United States, vertical mobility and loss of identification as Mexicans should theoretically be easier for those who approximate the Castilian type. All right. Again, caste system, race system, and a form of white supremacy. This is a significant insight because it is difficult to comprehend how persons of Mexican origin could repudiate a century and three-quarters of history from Hidalgo and Guerrero to Zapata and Cuauhtemoc Cardenas unless a Hispanic label helped them to shed their Indianness and Mexicanness. Mexicans have long been aware of their Indian background. For example, Paul S. Taylor found in the 1920s that generally the Mexicans of the Imperial Valley quite unconsciously speak and think of themselves as Mexicans and as Indian or mestizo. Repeatedly, Mexicans have spoken to the writer of the Mexicans and the so-called whites in the most casual matter-of-fact way. Only twice has objection raised to those designations by men who obviously were a part of Indian ancestry. All right, so how many of, remember who was classified as Spanish and Hispanic, so how much of that is in each of these so-called Mexicans? This altitude lay at the heart of the Chicano awakening of the 1960s and 1970s, with its emphasis upon the Indian homeland of Aztlán and a corresponding identification with the ancient Mexican and southwestern U.S. heritages. I have never known a Chicano to identify with the Alcázar of Toledo or the Torre del Oro of Seville, all right, the so-called Moors, you mean? Having gone into this background, then let us examine the 1980 census to see how the government manipulated statistical data to the detriment of Native Americans and mestizos. Hey, David Foley, yeah, go ahead and do that, man. If you like, put my email on the chat, or just hit me up on Telegram or whatever, and we can just link up. So it says here, the race question. The race question. Race. This is hijacked. That's what I'm saying. That whole concept of race, that's hijacked. Hey, Red Lion, if you're still there, let them know. Let them know about the race thing. It is quite clear that the results from the race question were flawed in that the terms white, black, or Negro, and Indian American are all ambiguous. They're all ambiguous. What do you mean? Who's the black? Who's the Negro? Who's the white? For example, many thousands of persons who wrote in the name of an Indian tribe, and many hundreds of thousands, perhaps 400,000 by projection, who identified themselves as of only American Indian ancestry, checked the boxes for either white or other. I suggest that the term Indian American is obscure and misleading in that it might be variously interpreted as Indian United States, Indian Americas, Indian American, and American Indian. Quite clearly, hundreds of thousands and millions, if one includes Latin America, American Indians, refuse to mark it. And who else he lifts out? The so-called black. They refuse to, yeah, mark themselves as Indian. Further, the term white in racist regions where black and white are perceived as opposites, crayon colors, right? Separating people by crayon colors, by looks, by physical appearance. So they're perceived as opposites within a bipolar ethnic framework apparently means not Caucasian or European, but not black, light or not pertaining to the black side of society. Oh, that we talking about the brown paper bag test that we talking about. Thus, many American Indians and Mexicans of Indian blood might well see themselves as white in such regions. Yep. It is significant that Mexicans choose either black or white designations more commonly in those regions. In the Northeast, for instance, so he's breaking up how it works in different regions of Mexico. There's regions of Mexico where they're literally split. They got part of the town, part of the people, they got the black, if the town is called, you know, Taco, right? Whatever, no disrespect, right? So you got the black Tacoans and then the white Tacoans, right? So they would classify themselves as, oh, I gotta put black so I don't be the same as the guy over there. So that's kind of what he's talking about. So he's saying in other regions, in the Northeast, for instance, Mexican origin persons choose the other category only 21.4% of the time. Mexicans in the South Central region range from 9.2%. Other in the East South Central to 24.6% in the South Atlantic and 37.5% in the West South Central, including Texas, for a Texas-dominated average of 36%. The North Central region saw 45.7% selecting other, while in the West, 51.2% choose other. So again, they're talking about Mexico in general here in this article. That's what Jack Forbes is using. But this kind of happens differently in different ways in all Latin American countries. And don't think don't, again, when they're saying Mexican, don't picture one type of person, guys. One type of look. So clearly persons of Mexican origin were strongly influenced by the ethos of the white, black, eastern half of the country. In the plains and west regions, however, Mexicans were often the largest minority, and the white-black nexus was weakened by the presence of higher percentages of American Indians and Asians. In any case, the ambiguity of the term white is underscored by the fact that the Census Bureau chose to place persons who classified themselves as non-white or as colored in the black or Negro category, and non-whites and people of color are black. If non-whites and people of color are black, then clearly those who are not black must be white or uncolored by similar reasoning. You see? So that's a hijack because you're like, I can't classify myself as, so let's say like a black Hispanic person, right? They come on, they're like, man, but I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm like, wait, hold up, wait, which one I gotta put? Hispanic? I can't, but I'm black, but I can't because it says black of African. I'm not African. You get what I'm saying? So a lot of people put white. On the other hand, brown and mestizo people were placed in the other category by Census Bureau staff. I would suggest that many Mexicans and other Latin Americans who selected the other category rather than white, so a lot of people end up putting other, right? Did so because they knew they were of indigenous American ancestry and because they lived in parts of the country where brown is and its equivalents, such as bronze, are acceptable self-designations. I would suggest also that about half of the Spanish origin population in the West shows other first because Indian American was interpreted as meaning Indian of the United States. And second, because Indian in Spanish is ordinarily a negative term, Indio often resembling the N word. And it did. Look at that. Indian synonymous with the, like resembling the N word, huh? Why? Historically, if you understand why, like if you understand the context, you would see how big this is right here. How could that be the same? How could it be the same if they don't, right? Or at least meaning lower class, backward, and poor. In any case, this discussion should illustrate that the race question was not designed with the Native Americans or Latin Americans in mind, nor was it fine-tuned by ethnically sensitive scholars who could have eliminated at least some of the ambiguity of the categories. It should be stressed, however, that any question that attempts to identify racial or social racial groups such as Black or Negro in the same list with nationalities such as Japanese is mixing apples and rocks and cannot yield really satisfactory results. Arbitrarily included in the Black or Negro group are many independent nationalities, again, arbitrarily included in the Black. There are so many nationalities such as Haitian, Nigerian, Sudanese, Jamaican, and so on. So are all those people the same? Now you see how they grouped. Who's in this Black category? Listen, this is a big one, right? This is what I'm saying. You call yourself Black, now you're the same as a Sudanese guy. Now you're the same as if you're from America, New England, and you have nothing to do with Haiti or French or anything like that, now you're the same as a Haitian because you're black. You're all black. You're all Negro. Jamaican. Jamaican, what is the motto of Jamaica? Out of many, one people. Out of many, one people. Not out of one people. Out of many, one people. That's Jamaica. What you mean? And so on. Similarly, Indian American and white are terms of a totally different order from Japanese, Guamanian, and Aleutians. Wow. The design of the question, I would argue, would tend to encourage many persons who could lay claim to an unlisted nationality to write in that nationality under other, especially if the nationality was of Native American origin, but the concept of tribe had no positive meaning or was unfamiliar. Persons checking Indian American were supposed to write in the names of their tribes rather than a nationality designation. The race question does not, in fact, ask respondents about race, nor is race defined. Instead, individuals are asked whether they are members of one of the 14 enumerated groups and nationalities or other. Respondents or census takers are instructed to fill the circle for the category with which the person most closely identifies, based on their perception, huh? So if a person thinks that everybody that's black is from Africa, oh, that's black, he's Negro, he's African origin. If you fill the Indian, American, or other circle, be sure to print the name of the specific Indian tribe or specific group, it says. So it says Guide to 1980 U.S. Decennial Census Publications. Interestingly, the ancestry in parentheses question also asks respondents to print the ancestry group with which the person identifies. Ancestry or origin or descent may be viewed as the nationality group, the lineage or the country in which the person or the person's parents or ancestors were born before their arrival in the United States. Similarly, persons responding to the Spanish origin question are told, a person is of Spanish, Hispanic origin or descent if the person identifies his or her ancestry with one of the listed groups that is Mexican, Puerto Rican, etc. Origin or descent ancestry may be viewed as the nationality group, the lineage or country in which the person or the person's parents or ancestors were born. Clearly, then, the Spanish origin and ancestry questions are almost exactly the same and should have yielded identical results, except that the latter was asked of less than 20% of the population. Both questions are also similar to the race question, since the latter is largely aimed at securing information about nationality or country of origin. And ancestry, Japanese Americans being lumped with Japanese and so on, only 3 of the 14 basic categories in the race question have anything at all to do with race, as the term is used by most English-speaking persons today. The deliberate mixing by the Census Bureau of the concept of race, nationality, lineage, country of origin, etc., no doubt led to the even more confusion in the minds of respondents. A Mexican person of Native American ancestry was actually discouraged by census instructions from selecting Indian American. He couldn't put in American Indian, even though he was. He just happened to be past the border, right? Like a Jaquis or any of those tribes that are in the region of Mexico, right? Even if he knows, even if he's literally lives on a reservation in Mexico or in an area where they know those are Indians, he couldn't pick Indian American, or he couldn't mention in any native ancestry. The instructions tell one to report a tribe if one has selected Indian American, thus precluding its use by most persons stemming from countries where tribe is never the term for the largest native ethnic groups, such as Maya, Aztec, Quechua, Aymara, Otomi, Guarani, but only a pejorative term for smaller, primitive in parentheses groups. In Mexico, the word Mexican in parentheses has a double meaning. All right? It refers both to a person living in the United Mexican States, Estados Unidos Mexicanos, and to the Nahua language, Nahuatl. Mexicano, Nahuatl, is spoken by perhaps 1 million persons in central Mexico. In no sense could Mexican-speaking people be categorized as belonging to a tribe, but they are both Native American and Mexican. In conclusion, we can argue that the race question was useless as a tool for getting a race or racial ancestry, especially as regards brown people of neither white nor black status. Or you're in between, you're like, damn, what do I put? White, brown, black? I'm gonna go with black, but I can't because I'm not African. Man, I guess I gotta put Hispanic. We might almost conclude that the Bureau of the Census did not want to know the race of Latin Americans of Americanoid native, racial origin, or the numbers of persons with dual identity. Example, Black and Indian, Chilean and Mapuche, Chinese and European American. The race question distinguishes between Indian American, Aleuts, and Eskimos. Why is a mystery? Because all such persons are served by the same agencies, have the same indigenous legal rights, and tend to associate with the same Native American urban organizations when away from home communities, breaking up Native Americans into three groups, taking 3 out of 14 basic groups in the race question, may have had the effect of further narrowing the meaning of Indian American and actuating the possible interpretation that Mexican Indians, Guatemalans, etc., were not supposed to count themselves as Indian Americans. It says here the Spanish origin count. All right, we got 5 more pages to read. Hope you're enjoying the reading, getting close to the dismount. Again, we pull out the babies, we dodge the hijacks, but this is a very, it's a sensitive subject for a lot of people, and not just me. I'm not. This is history. To me, I don't care. I'm very confident with who I am, and for whoever appreciates what this reading does for them, it lifts them up, makes them understand things a little better, then good. As long as I can reach one person that I help, I did my job. We don't care about what people think, others, haters and stuff. So it says here the Spanish origin count. In 1980, all persons were required to indicate whether they were of Spanish, Hispanic origin or descent. Many Native Americans of Arizona, New Mexico, and California, Pueblos, Pimas, Papagos, Native California Indians, and others must have puzzled over this question because a high percentage have Spanish surnames and may even have some degree of Spanish or Mexican ancestry. Okay? Some such as the Tigua of Isleta del Sur, Texas, are Spanish-speaking also. When we look at the 94,000 Indians who were also counted as Spanish origin, we find that they represented 0.6% of the Spanish origin population of 14,608,673, exactly the same as the percentage of Native Americans in the non-Spanish origin populations of 211,927,132. This surely must be more than mere coincidence, since the actual proportion of Indians of Spanish origin must be 50 to 75%, counting all those of 1/4 or more Native American ancestry. The fact that a population that should have reported a very high proportion of persons descended from native nations of the Americas instead reported the exact same proportions as the Britannic population confirms that the question asked by the Census Bureau served to stifle or discourage a truthful racial response by these persons, just like they did with black folks. They made you choose black. Marta Tienda and Vilma Ortiz take the results literally. Racially, the Hispanic population is predominantly white, especially if one assumes that those who wrote in Spanish as their racial category are mostly white or mestizo. All right. So that's Marta and Vilma's opinion, who take this literally. This conclusion is at first glance borne out by the responses to the race question. Of the 14,600,000 persons identified as of white Spanish, as of Spanish origin, the following racial designations were selected: white, 8 million, right? 8 million, 55% shows white. Look, other 5,800,000, 40%, and black, 390,000. Asian and Pacific Islanders, 166,000. American Indian, Eskimo, and Aleut, 94,000. The 8,700,000 persons of Mexican origin made the following selections: white, 53%, they chose white. Others, other, almost the other half, right? And then black, 1.8%. Ha. What are they basing the blacks? This is what I'm saying. This is all hijacks, guy. We live in a colonial, imperialist, racialist system we're under. Significantly, American indigenous ancestry is not even reported separately for persons of Mexican origin. The other in this case includes American Indian, Eskimo, and Aleut, Asian and Pacific Islander, and other races combined. This is very revealing in that it illustrates the utter lack of interest on the part of the Census Bureau in the Indian background of most Mexicans. About 92% of the Spanish surnames, persons of Texas in 1980, were of Mexican origin. Nonetheless, only 0.2% of the Spanish surnames selected American Indian as their race. So, guys, remember, when it comes to so-called black Caribbean people from Spanish-speaking countries or Central America, so, and they come to the up and they get stuck in this census thing, same thing. They might not choose majority white, they might choose majority black. It's just that's how it is. It's the same thing. They just only difference they might choose more black or other. And then Hispanic, but it depends on the person too, what they believe in, what they want to classify themselves as. A lot of people, yeah, they want to pass more for white because in society where they're coming from, it's looked upon better still today. In California, where 80% of the Spanish surnamed were of Mexican background, 0.8% selected American Indian in some manner. These percentages are, of course, incredibly low and would indicate that something is wrong with census methodology. Clearly, the Bureau has made it difficult for us to say just how many of the more than 14 million persons in the USA of Mesoamerican, Caribbean, and South American backgrounds are of Native American ancestry and/or ethnic cultural identity. Of course, as regards ancestry, we can add up from the ancestry question the numbers of Bolivians, Ecuadorians, Guatemalans, Hondurans, Mexicans, Peruvians, Salvadorans, and Nicaraguans, and multiply the result by 80% and estimate an Indian ancestry for those populations. Then we can arbitrarily add up to the totals for other countries where Indian ancestry ranges from 20% to perhaps 50%, such as Colombia, Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, Puerto Rico, and Venezuela. 50%, huh? And to be conservative, multiply the total by 25%. Then we must add at least 20% of the other Spanish, since Paraguayans and others of Indian race would be part of that total. Finally, it would be good to add a proportion of persons from Brazil, Belize, Guyana, Trinidad, Dominica, Aruba, etc., of Indian background, but these numbers are too difficult to segregate in the published census reports. An effort such as the yields approximately 6,500,000 persons from the 80% countries, 437,500 persons from the 25% countries, and 13,000 from the other Spanish countries. To the resulting total of 7 million, we should, of course, add some of the persons simply classified as Spanish, Hispanic by the Census Bureau, 2,600,000 persons, but we must forego this exercise because the Bureau tells us that this category represents a general type of response which may encompass several ancestry groups. In short, we don't know what it means. In any case, by using this method, we have discovered, in parentheses, another 7 million or more persons of autochthonous American ancestry. Using the numbers from the ancestry question as projected by the Bureau, if we use the numbers from the Spanish origin question, we have to resort to a different calculation because Guatemalans, Bolivians, and so forth are not identified separately. We can, however, take 80% of the 8,700,000 Mexicans, yielding 7 million, 25% of the 2 million Puerto Ricans, yielding 500,000, and a conservative 20% of the 3,050,000 other Spanish, yielding 600,000 for a total of 8,100,000 persons of Native American ancestry. All right. So this is all statistics and numbers and blah, blah, blah. You get what he's saying, but he has a little bit of hijack with it too. Who are you counting as, so-called Mexican? Interestingly, this total is extreme variance with the Census Bureau's racial or ancestry totals, where we find that, as noted, only 0.6% of Spanish origin selected American Indian, but 40% selected other, for a number of total of 5,841,000. So, before there's a great awakening that's been going on in the last couple of years, how many, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, how many so-called Black folks selected American Indian? I bet you it'd be very low too, compared to the general population. I'm not saying people didn't, but I'm just trying to explain to you. It's kind of like the same thing. We do not know what other means. So other, and also other can be so many things. Other, let's just put an other category. So racially speaking, and the almost 6 million others do not have same distribution patterns as the 7 million or 8 million persons of indigenous American origin we have identified. More significant, we cannot tell how many persons classified as Spanish actually speak an American language or identify in any way with a Native American community. Thus, we cannot help Native American service agencies to anticipate the needs that might be generated by Maya refugees or by other Indian newcomers. We also cannot examine how people of color fare in U.S. society, since the question of color has been carefully disguised beneath Spanish origin. Okay, this is what I've been saying. The question of color, right? We're talking about people of color, so-called Black. Or people, with melanated complexions. They have been carefully disguised beneath Spanish origin. Candace Nelson and Marta Tienda know that in a socioeconomic profile, Cubans emerge as the most advantaged, Hispanics, Puerto Ricans most disadvantaged, with Mexicans falling in between. Cuban immigrants. So that's the only Spanish countries this lady knows. Marta and Candace, these ladies. So Cuban immigrants are the least linguistically proficient, yet they are more successful in the labor market than either of the two older immigrant groups, because they had more of a struggle and they had to create things in Cuba because they weren't allowed to have a lot of things, or they were very poor. It's a dictatorship, so they develop skills. The people develop skills on the street. They're very skillful people. Yes, they are. They seek to explain these differences largely by means of socioeconomic or class analysis. I would argue, however, that color, being part of a color-ranked caste system, is the key difference. Cubans, especially the more successful newcomers of the 1960s, are light-skinned, Are all Cubans light skinned? This is what I'm saying. That's the hijack. Mexicans are ordinary brown, but usually lack visible African features. All right. So that's the ones again, and what happened to, so what are you calling African features, right? Like, are you talking about like the Olmec? Is that what you're talking about when you're saying visible African features? Is that what you classify as so-called African? Because that's an Olmec, right? Ancient Mexico, right? While Puerto Ricans are often either brown or visibly part African. So Puerto Ricans get to classify Hispanic, but they are either brown or visibly part African. But they're in the same category as me, so make it make sense. The use of the Hispanic and Spanish origin categories is not only insulting to mestizos, that's what I've been trying to say, that is insulting to me and other people of Native American race. Shout out to my Chorotegan Huetar ancestors, you're not forgotten. Representing a perpetuation of the Spanish Empire's exaltation of whiteness in modern U.S. society, but also helps disguise the crucial racial differences existing among such groups as Cubans, Argentinians, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans. In our own countries, there's a racial divide, guys, whether it's openly seen or in covert, right? Like hitting racist people, right? But it's here. There's divisions in our own countries, guys. Ingenious arguments must be invented to explain why Cuban success in a white racist society, as if whiteness did not matter. Conversely, the Native American, African, that's the hijack, and Afro-Native American, that's the hijack, ancestry of millions of Mexicans. What? African millions? Wait, millions of Mexicans, Afro-Native, and African, huh? You mean Negroid. You mean black Mexicans, who could be Indians. Okay. It could also be some of the black Spanish that got there, right? With the conquistadors, these Moors and these Sephardi Jews and these black Europeans. Who was the first president of Mexico? Was he not a so-called black man? Hmm. And Puerto Ricans is made to disappear as if by magic. So automatically, all that gets erased. Whatever your ethnic background, now you're just Hispanic. All that got magically erased. Just like when you chose black, you're not a Choctaw, you're not a Catawba, you're not a, Saponi, you're not a Chickasaw anymore. You're not a so-called Cherokee anymore. It just got erased like magic. Again, ingenious arguments must be invented to explain the slow progress of such non-white Latin Americans and white racist society, since their physical appearances has been made inexcusable. Conclusion. After the 1980 census was completed, a group of experts, mostly statisticians, was assembled to make recommendations for improvement. This group, which apparently included no Native Americans and no authorities in the fields of Native American, Chicano, Mexicano, Black, or Asian American studies, like they left out all these people, experts, and at least in their own people, right? But how? But are these experts speaking for us really? Like, is a professional in Black studies really gonna help you, or is he more of a Pan-African? The 1980 phraseology, Indian American, is ambiguous. Does it apply only to tribes native to the United States, or does it encompass all Indians of North and South America? Presumably, the former was intended. In general, in the beginning, they actually didn't include the others from Central and South America or the Caribbean. That's what he's saying. Initially, that's what was intended. But should those of Mexican, South Central American origin not also have the opportunity to conveniently identify the origin? And would this not be useful information? A good question. Do I have the right? Knowing my ancestry come from Costa Rica, don't I have a right to also identify with my people? Or Do I have to be just called Spanish? Do you guys have a right as black folks to identify as what you are really than other than black? Yes, you do. Other people do too, though. I just want you guys to understand that. Okay, get off the looks. The genealogy don't lie. The genealogy is there. The experts then proposed that the Census Bureau test a variety of question designs for race and ethnicity, including some that combine the collection of information on Hispanic origin with the other race and ethnicity information. Their proposal was very similar to the FICEs of 1974 and 75, following the question, is this person of Spanish Hispanic origin? Yes includes Puerto Rican, Cuban, Mexican, Chicano, and other Hispanic. The schedule would identify as Spanish Hispanic or not Spanish Hispanic. Persons in each of the following categories: white, black, Indian, U.S. tribes, print tribe, Indian, Mexican, South or Central American, other specify. National Academy of Sciences, 1985. It appears that although the Bureau of Census paid for the above study, it has chosen to ignore its recommendations just as it is ignored the designs offered by the FICE in 1975. Quite clearly, Native Americans have not been able to develop the political power necessary to influence a massive bureaucracy. The Spanish-speaking political leadership has seen the wisdom of maximizing its strength by counting every conceivable person as Hispanic. And it has been able to work with the Republican Party, especially in playing the game of numbers. Playing these games, stop playing with me, man. But has this strategy been truly useful? If indeed the Hispanic concept is useful, then we should also adopt a Gaelic category that would include French Canadians, Cajuns, Louisiana Creoles, Haitians, French West Indians, and French-speaking West Africans, a Lusitanic. All right, so you see that? That's like grouping all those people together under Gaelic. He's just giving you an example what this Hispanic category is doing to us. A Lusitanic category would include what? Brazilians, Cape Verdeans, Azorians, Portuguese, Angolans, etc. Of course. So that's deep right there. Lusitanic, right? That's the area of Portugal and the Iberian Peninsula. So if there was a Lusitanic category, that would include Brazilians and Cape Verdeans. And why Angolans? This is deep. And all Cape Verdeans, true Cape Verdean know the history of where Cape Verdeans are in the world. Angola is one of those places or colonies where there's a lot of Cape Verdeans, so-called Cape Verdeans. Angola was colonized by Brazilians, by Americans. That included Sephardic Jews and Indians, wealthy ones that went over there and colonized, black Europeans that colonized Angola, Portuguese ones. And that's why they consider themselves part of the Cape Verdeans too. They have the same heritage. The Azores, a lot of the Azores, Madeiras, but in Cabo Verde mostly, right? The Portuguese Creole. And it says, of course, a Britannic or Anglic group. If it is scientifically useful to lump people of different races and nationalities together under the category of a former imperial colonizer, then why limit this analytical breakthrough to the Spanish-speaking world? Yes, why? Why don't they fix our status? Why we gotta walk around with a tag? In fact, I would argue that nothing useful is achieved that could not be easily gained by simply treating each nationality or group separately and then adding them together whenever one needed to deal with a composite group such as Latin Americans, Central Americans, South Americans, etc. The fact of the matter is that the Hispanic and Republican strategies have proven disastrous for Chicano Mexicanos, Puerto Ricans, and Latin Americans in general. Jimmy Carter largely ignored the Spanish-speaking, but the Reagan-Bush years have seen a serious decline in the living standards of La Raza. internally and the most devastating attacks upon indigenous and mestizo peoples ever, with more brown and American skills. Sorry, with more brown Americans killed than in the 19th century, and the impoverishment of hundreds of thousands of refugees. Now the Republican plan for free trade, in parentheses, with Mexico and Central America promises to literally wipe out the jobs remaining for most low-income raza. All right, so now he's going on his other things. We talking about la raza, that's a whole other thing. But, shout out to the people who rep that, right? The use of the Republicans' Spanish Empire category has not brought strength or success. Instead, it has blunted activism and allowed the party to do well what it always does, help the rich and powerful at the expense of the common people. It is time for Americo Latinos to throw off the Hispanic joke. Viva la independencia! Hey, man, it's time for all you guys to stop using that tag. You get what I'm saying? Just like stop using that black thing. Calling yourself Hispanic, Latino, all those are tags. What did your fourth grade grandparents call themselves? All 64 of them. Yeah, you have 64 fourth grade grandparents. Do you know them all? Is that what they call themselves? Huh? That's the end of this article. Viva la independencia! Libertad o muerte! Yeah, you already know. Freedom or death, right? That's what, yeah. So that was a pretty interesting article. Every time this is from 1992. Every time I just read these articles from Jack Forbes, I just be like, if only he could update, revise his work, knowing the true history, right, of so-called black folks and how complex it can be in the Americas, and how you can't just be separating. You're saying Indians separated from the blacks. That's two tags. I think I think this article hopefully helps more in general than upsets people and makes people hate me. Um, I think that it helps understand other people's situations too, not just your own little corner of the world or your own situation, and not just group history into a black category. History is just history. Nations are nations, it's not based on color. We have been learning that. Okay, we're going to continue learning. We're going to learn so many more things. We're just getting started. Okay. But I just think that he would do such an amazing job if he knew the real history, to be able to write a real article, because he's a really good researcher and he has the time and the patience to write and write and write and write, you know. But either way, we get this version from 1992 with our own updated research. You gotta be able to discern what is being said, how does it apply to you, and these times and everything, what all the new knowledge and information that we got, all the new research that's come out, all the overstanding that has come about in the last couple of years, and a lot of years now going. We got almost 10 years now. We're 8 years strong. I mean, at least my channel. I'm not talking about everybody else. And I know, this is going on a lot longer for other people, but it wasn't such a big popular thing until recent times. Okay. But I hope you enjoyed the article. Again, the Hispanic spin, party politics and governmental manipulation of ethnic identity by Jack Forbes. This was an article, part of the scholarly journal, The Latin American Perspectives, Volume 19, Number 4. The Politics of Ethnic Construction, Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, question mark, from autumn 1992. All right. We got some other articles we're going to get into. I won't even show them to you. Not yet. Done. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I appreciate everybody that came through, gave me your time, listened to me read for 2 hours. That's a good time to end this. appreciate you guys coming through, being respectful, you know, talking amongst each other and just, building together, learning together. I told you I hadn't read this article at all. This is the first time. And luckily, it turned out to be a pretty good article and it helped me kind of talk about a little bit of the context, to apply to it while we're reading these kind of things. Okay. Eh, de nada, man. Gracias por venir. Gracias por escuchar y por el apoyo. Gracias. Gracias a todos los latinos, so-called, hispanos, a mi gente de Centroamérica, del Caribe, de Suramérica. Gracias por estar aquí y entender. Y ojalá vea la misión en la que estoy, lo que estoy tratando de hacer y unir a la gente, unir a la familia. Gracias. How you guys like my Spanish? Hey, don't worry. My Spanish has a big accent, just like my English. Just like my English. Remember, I grew up in Boston, so pack your cow. I got stuck on that for a lot of years. Packing my cow. Vamos, vamos. Okay, pura vida. Yeah, pura vida, mi gente. I'm gonna give you your day back. I'm gonna go ahead and get to other things I have to take care of. Hey, Joe, what do you know? Hit me up, Joe. I'm free. Hey, man, thank you. Thank you for all the support, guys. Anybody who donated today as well, became a member. I appreciate you guys. You can have support if you like by joining my channel membership or going in my Patreon page, and you'll be able to receive some exclusive videos and a lot of books there. All right. Like your car. Yeah. All right, man. We're gonna go out. Shout out to again Chase in the beginning. I don't know if I mentioned it. Shout out to Chase and Science for the beat and the intro. We're gonna go out with another outro by our good brother Science, who's in the chat. Let him know. I think it's a very groovy. These are pretty groovy beats. Shout out to all the producers: Olmec, Robin Dre, Vizo, Breeze. Man, I got so many. Hold up. Let me just make sure I name them all. Sebastian Aguilar, thank you, man. Gerald Collins, Miko Saga. All right. Let's see who else. Antonio Jackson. These all people have hooked me up with beats. Maniacs Beats. Shout out to Maniac, Alman Deliman, Jalen or Vivo. I said that already. Joseph. I know I had a Joseph somewhere. Joseph Levels. Yeah, Joseph Levels. Yeah. Shout out to all the music producers. All right, we're gonna go out with a beat from our good brother Science. He's in the live chat now. And let's see. Okay, sorry, I was reading sign. Yeah, thanks for coming through, guys. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the article. I thought it was pretty good. Hope you can pick sign out of it. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. Wow.
chasing our days, no breaks, stuck in this phase, no escape. With truth in your face, we need to wake up before it's too late. Before it's too late. Oh, wow.